Hi everyone, good morning. So as you guys can see, I'm now back in my home, and if you watched my previous vlog, I actually stated there that I was leaving for a work trip. So at this point of the video, I have been back home in the past, I think 3 days, and it just took me a while to get back into the rhythm of things because after all, when I come back from a work trip, I have to rearrange my kit, really super clean my makeup brushes and deal with the laundry and household chores, things like that, yada yada yada. So I hope that you enjoyed me showing you guys some shorts of my trip to Bicol. So it's a very popular tourist destination here in the Philippines, and it's actually very well known for the Mayon volcano, which is a stratovolcano, which is known to have the most perfect cone shape in the world. So I was very happy to see that. But anyway, I digress. Our video for today, I'm gonna be discussing the Radiant Fusion Baked Powders from Kiko Milano. Now, I also showed you guys this in that vlog that I was just talking about, and I actually stated there if there's anybody interested in hearing my thoughts about these powders, please let me know so that I can talk about it here on my vlog. And sure enough, one of you guys actually made a comment that you wanted to hear my opinions about this, and I said it's actually perfect to talk about this because I have not used these powders yet. So I initially bought them because I wanted to use them for work, but unfortunately it was not possible because the shoot that I was on, we were shooting under natural light. It was very hot and humid, all of my talents are very sweaty, so I don't think this powder would be perfect to use for that kind of situation. And I find this as a perfect opportunity to try these powders with you guys because at least we'll be getting to know these powders together, and we'll also be getting a very nice first impression kind of a feel for these powders. Now, I do have to say that these Kiko Milano Radiant Fusion Baked Powders were not in my radar. And the reason how I come to know about these powders is that when I was at work a few weeks ago, or maybe that was a few months ago, I was at a variety show, and there were a lot of makeup artists in the studio. And the makeup artist beside me, who's my friend Bok, we always talk about makeup stuff. So we always discuss new acquisitions, favorite products, and what was your experience with this type of product, this brand, yada yada yada. I know you get what I mean. And he just showed me this, and he goes hey, there's something I have been enjoying. It's actually these Radiant Fusion Baked Powders, and I go oh, that's actually very pretty. And I said with the packaging alone, the square shape here of the powders, I go it actually reminds me of the Laura Mercier Candle Glow powders. Look at that. Now, these Laura Mercier Candle Glow powders, by the way, are no longer in production, which made me very sad because this is one of my most favorite products ever. I love the effect that it leaves on my skin. So when he showed me this, I quickly picked this up from my kit, and then we just did a side-by-side comparison. Now, basing off of how we see these products, visually, we can see that they have very different finishes. Wherein the Candle Glow powders here from Laura Mercier has a very nice radiant finish, if you just tilt it in the light there. And with the Kiko Milano powders, we actually don't get that. Okay, now I don't know what the effect is going to be on our skin, so let's just try to see if the Kiko Milano powders will actually catch my heart. Now, the Kiko Milano Radiant Fusion Baked Powder comes in a silver packaging like this, in a clamshell type of a packaging. And there's actually a mirror here, and you get 8.5 grams of product on the pan, which is not bad, especially for the price, because this retailed for 1,350 Philippine pesos. So it's actually not bad, because I do remember that this Candle Glow powders from Laura Mercier were a little bit expensive. They were over 2,250, I think, at the time that this was still available. And also for comparison, you actually get 9 grams of product in comparison to this. So you still get good value for your money for this powder. Okay, now it's very light. Looking at the packaging, this will not add any weight into your bag or onto your makeup kit. Now the formula of this is actually baked, so it has a very nice creamy texture to it. It also has a very nice glide because I actually did swatch this at the store and I kind of loved it, and it's actually a very different experience in comparison to that of the Candle Glow powder that I have here. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's also it has a very different kind of a feeling as well, or an experience in comparison to the other finishing powders from Hourglass. So let's try to see if we can insert some comparisons a little bit later in the video. Okay, now these powders has a very nice vanilla scent to it, which I actually love. It's actually very pleasant. It's not overpowering and overbearing. But if you're someone who's allergic to scents or reactive to scents, approach this with caution. Now, I only purchased 2 powders with me. So this is powder number 02, so it has a very nice warm tone to it. And this is powder number 04, also a very warm tone, but it's a little bit deeper than number 02. Now, I believe these powders from Kiko Milano had 6 shades in it. And I was actually also very interested in purchasing powder number 03 and number 05, but I stopped myself because I also have similar products with deeper tones in my kit, and I didn't want to have doubles, especially that I have so much products with me. Like for example, this color here, I've been saving it and I love this. So it's actually deeper than 02. And most especially 04. So their undertones are actually very different. And I also do have some of my Hourglass finishing powders here, especially this one. So it's another deeper shade. So it has a very nice a very champagne-y kind of a thing, a beigey tone. And I also do have other lighter shades of finishing powders here from Hourglass, which can actually fit in between these Kiko Milano powders. So the rest of the powders here are bronzers and highlighters. Okay, so I won't delve into that. Now I actually did have a hard time choosing which big Radiance powder I wanted to get when I was swatching products in store. And because sometimes with these baked radiant powders or finishing powders, sometimes the color tones are very close to each other and it's very hard to differentiate. So the way that I approached my purchase of these powders is that I actually purchased colors which I wasn't going to use on myself. And because with me I need a deeper shade of a finishing powder just to work with me. And for the past few months that I have been working with people who have lighter skin tones. So I knew that I would be using this more than using a powder that will work for my skin tone. So hopefully when I'm going to be trying this out, either of these powders might work to a certain degree. But what's the most important thing about doing this video is that we can gauge the formulation of it, how it applies on the skin, how it blends, and on how easy it is to actually work with. Okay, and at this point of the video, I'm gonna put on some foundation, maybe a hint of concealer and powder, and let's try to see how these baked fusion Radiant Fusion baked powders from Kiko Milano will work on my skin. Okay, so I have some foundation, powder, and concealer down. And also before I started putting on my makeup, I already had my skincare down, sunscreen, brows. All the information you need is gonna be down below on the description box, okay? And also one thing that I do have to say is that I am using a mix of artificial light and natural light for us today. So I'm hoping that this will be a good approximation of what you'll see in person. And I've also changed up my foundation for today. So because I got a little bit of some color when I was at work, so I'm actually using my Estee Lauder Double Wear Foundation in the color Cashew, and I did set it lightly with some loose setting powder. So we still have that matte look, and we can see how radiant these powders are gonna appear on the face. And I'm gonna start by using the light shade. So this is color number 02, and I'm gonna use this as a highlighting powder of sorts. And let's try using it in the under eye area. So I'm just gonna use the same brush that I used to apply the loose setting powder in my under eye area, and look how much product this brush head picks up. And I'm just gonna tap it lightly here in my under eye, and I'm just gonna buff it. Okay, what I'm seeing right now is that I think that the powder is just way too light for my skin tone, especially at the moment. And it's casting a little bit of some gray tones on my skin, but that's actually my fault because this is not my powder. But I can actually see that it's quite smoothing onto the skin. It's not super radiant, but it actually has a very nice soft finish to it. Also, I do have to say that it's actually enhancing a little bit of my texture in this part of my face. I think you guys can see that because this is how it looks like without the powder. So usually when I'm working with finishing powders, I always try to avoid this area because it always happens anyway. But for this powder, it just emphasizes it way too much, so just approach this with caution, okay? But I do love the soft focus kind of the effect that I see with this powder. Okay, so now let's try the powder number 04. And I'm gonna get this angled Koyudo brush, and I'm just gonna pick up a little bit of this. Now I'm saying that I don't get too much fluff from the pan, not too much disturbance, which is actually a good indication for me. And I'm just gonna put this on top of my cheekbones. This shade is actually so much better in comparison to 02. I like the tone that it's giving into my skin, and it blends beautifully with the powder that I applied earlier. Nice finish, nice tone as well. I love that. So let me get a bigger brush. I'm gonna use the F01 from Chikuhodo, and I'm just gonna press it more. Okay, so there's a little bit of some product fluff that I can see from the pan, but there's not a lot of product disturbance, which I appreciate. And let me run that here on my forehead. That surprisingly is working for me. It has a very nice tone to it that's working with the undertone of my skin and also my tan. And let me apply it in a buffing motion to the rest of my, in my eye, to the rest of my face, here at the side of my nose, and maybe in this portion where I got some texture. Yeah, it's still there. Okay, so I'm just gonna buff out and blend out everything. So what I'm seeing is we have a very nice soft focus kind of an effect, a very nice velvety finish, and it's not super radiant, but it's just right. So if you're someone who has oily skin, I think this is absolutely perfect for you to use. And I'm also seeing that it's actually very easy to build up the color and the intensity. So let me get a smaller brush here. So this is the TF3 brush, and I'm just gonna pick up some of this and apply it in a very precise manner here on my cheekbones and blend it. Yeah, so it's actually very easy to blend up. It's also very easy to layer on, but again, you have to approach this with caution because finishing powders, if you apply way too much, it's going to look very cakey. But I do have to say that it's not looking cakey at the moment, even if I've been adding a nice amount of layer on, which is great. Because just for comparison, let me get the Candle Glow powder here from Laura Mercier, and I'm gonna use a big fluffy brush for this. So I'm using the F09. What's this? Yeah, the F09. I'm just gonna really press the brush head into the pan here, because the main difference that I see between both formulations is that I think you have more binders here, because I think you have more pearl in this in comparison to this. So you just really need to break the surface of the Candle Glow powders. Okay, and now I'm just gonna buff that into my skin. Work it really well and just really ensure that I get nice coverage all over. So this is the Koyudo Kakishi Buzome blush brush. So I'm just gonna really work it into the pan here, and I'm gonna apply that here onto my cheekbones and blend it out. Alright, so as you guys can see, we have a very nice radiant finish here on my skin with the Candle Glow powder from Laura Mercier. Now in comparison, we actually don't have that radiance with the Radiant Fusion Big Powder from Kiko Milano. Look at that, but it's much more softer in comparison to this. And also I can say that in terms of enhancing texture, the Kiko Milano powder actually enhanced my texture quite a bit than the Candle Glow powder from Laura Mercier. Now, I'm just taking this with a grain of salt because the powder that I used on this side of my face was actually not for my skin tone. Okay, so that's something that you guys should understand, because I think if I just got the right powder for my skin tone, the texture won't be enhanced too much, because even with the Candle Glow powder here, you can still see my texture. But then again, I've always said before, when you're using finishing powders, you always have to approach it with caution, and you also have to layer it lightly. Okay, but the only difference that I see is that even if it says here in the packaging that it's radiant, it's actually not radiant, but it's more soft focus, because the Candle Glow here is actually very radiant, and I love this finishing powder to death. Now the Laura Mercier here, as I've said, is no longer in production, and they came out with their Real Flawless Luminous Perfecting Pressed Powder. So I think this is the one that took the place of this. So I'm just gonna apply a little bit of this under my eyes here. So I'm using this brush for that, and I'm just going to set it lightly. I'm just gonna brush it lightly. Now, one thing I do have to say though is that even if this is a translucent color, it's actually quite light. You can actually still see my skin peeking through. Now, what I don't like about this is that if you apply this on a textured part of your face, it actually enhances it, and I can actually already see it enhancing the texture in this portion of my under eye, things like that. So I don't normally use this in the under eye area, but I'm just showing this to you guys. So you just can have a nice comparison with whatever finishing powders that you actually use. But with this one, if I just want to apply it in the rest of my face, it actually is quite good. But I just avoid very textury portions of my face. So what's the main difference that you guys can see between these Laura Mercier finishing powders and the Kiko Milano? Okay, so we still have a very nice skin-like quality to the Laura Mercier powders here. Actually very, very nice. I really love this type of finish. But I do have to say that the Kiko Milano powders here, especially from afar when lighting is good, it actually kind of perfects the skin a little bit, and it actually looks like you're actually quite flawless and filtered. So if this is the kind of look that you want, then by all means try using this powder. What I want to do right now is I'm just going to be playing around, so I'm going to pick up more of this baked powder here, and I'm going to apply it with a velour puff here in my under eye area. So I'm using the color number 4 now. So I'm just adding more coverage, more opacity, and we're actually seeing that we have this very nice filtered effect going on. And if you have texture on your skin, using a velour puff would actually be perfect in applying this powder for this purpose. But then again, you have to be very careful, because if you overdo it, you're going to look very cakey in no time. Look at that, very, very filtered looking. It's amazing though. If I'm gonna be working with someone for stage or something, or for a variety show, I think this would be good. But for real life, I would really approach this with caution and use this in very thin layers. Amazing though, that's nice. because in comparison, so this is the Bake Candle Glow from Laura Mercier. I'm just gonna add this here in my under eye area. I think it might be too radiant for that, and because the tone of this actually fits perfectly for my skin, it doesn't give a very obvious filtered kind of a finish on the face. But now that we're playing around with this, it just can dawn in my head that I think the Kiko Milano powders here have a very similar finish to the Hourglass finishing powders here. So this is the Hourglass one, and let me get the number 2 powder here from Kiko Milano, and let me swatch it right beside here. Look at that. So both of them are quite similar. I really feel that the Hourglass powder here has a more luxe feeling to it. You have more creaminess in terms of application of the powder, more smoothness in comparison to the Kiko Milano one. There's also a huge price difference between these two products, and also formulation. But overall, all the powders that I show you guys today, they're all very similar in the way that they're actually created. So they share almost the same similar ingredients, like synthetic fluorophyllite, mica, silica, and all those shimmery type of ingredients, depending on which brand. So some certain ingredients take top tier while the others don't. They have very similar effects on the skin, but the finishes are just a little bit different because one ingredient is higher in ratio than to other powders. And yeah, I think that's it. So maybe just as a one final kind of a comparison, I have here my Guerlain Meteorites, and this is in the color warm Dore. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this, use the brush that I used earlier, and I'm just gonna apply this on top of all the Kiko Milano powders here. And I'm using this as an adjuster of sorts, because this Guerlain Meteorites in warm, especially the new one, is the one that actually works perfectly for my skin. And I know that if I just blend this into the Kiko Milano powders, it's going to adjust itself and it's gonna work perfectly together. Okay, so my final thoughts is that these products are actually very good. These Kiko Milano Radiant Fusion Bake Powders, especially for the price point. And the only thing that you guys have to do is you have to approach this with caution, because as I've been saying throughout the video, if you apply way too much product of this, it's gonna become very, very cakey. And if you're someone who has oily skin, throughout the day, this is going to look very, very shiny, especially when the natural oils of your skin is pushing through the product. Okay, so just go find the right shade for your skin tone, and this will work for you. Look at that. That's a very nice finish. I do love it. Alright, so that's it. So if you guys have any more questions about how I use the Radiant Fusion Bake Powders from Kiko Milano, or any of the other products that I show you guys today, please let me know down in the comments box, and let's have a conversation about it. Alright? Okay, so that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye!